Hi, and welcome to the Holly C Podcast, a show about expressing your brilliance with ease and flow. I'll show you how to take the woo-woo out of the clouds and apply it to real life for effortless action. This show is for world changers and future world changers, so if you know there's more to life and you're wondering what's next, this is your show. Hi, I'm Holly, your host. I'm a speaker, author, teacher of health, vitality, and spirituality, and also a dragon spirit guide. Today's episode is episode number 53, meaning I have been podcasting for exactly a year. Woohoo! So today is going to be a 1-year anniversary celebration episode. I will share a little bit more about my story of how I got started podcasting, how I'm making a difference in the world, and how you can too. There's a key takeaway from this episode, and I'm going to repeat it over and over again because it's so important. In fact, I'll start right now. If you want to change the world, take action. That's all there is to it. I'll talk a little bit more, though, about that because sometimes you could be spinning in circles. That's taking action, but taking action to spin in circles. You want to take aligned action so that you're heading in the direction that you want to go and that you're making an impact, making a difference in the world. So let me share the story of the podcast with you first. I had the idea to start a podcast more than a year ago, probably more than 2 years ago. I probably had this little kernel of an idea for at least 1.5 years, maybe 2 years before I actually launched my podcast. Now, if I was totally brand new to speaking and sharing my thoughts and teaching and uncomfortable with technology, if I didn't have a website, I could cut myself some slack to take 1.5, 2 years before actually launching my podcast. But you hear how even if I didn't know those things, that 2 years, let's use 2 years. 2 years seems like an awfully long time to start a podcast, especially these days. Everything is so simple now. You don't need to have perfect sound or a perfect intro or the perfect words. You just press record and start talking. And then you put it up on the internet because it's so simple to do that. Now, some of you are freaking at that idea because you go, well, there's a chance of making mistakes. What if I put it up and I say something wrong? What if nobody listens to me? Guess what? Those two fears kind of cancel each other out because if you're scared nobody's going to listen to you, then it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. And if you make mistakes and people hear it, it means people are listening to you. So I understand those fears because that's what I was going through too. You would think with all the experience I had speaking on telesummits and online summits and teaching online courses that a podcast would be a simple transition. In fact, it should be easier because there's no video. It's just me talking. So why did it take 2 years? I understood technology. I knew how to record. I knew how to edit files. I knew how to upload. I knew how to jump through all those technical hurdles, so what was stopping me? Was it a lack of content? There's that fear too. What do I talk about every single week? But clearly, if I had the idea to do a podcast, I must have had at least 1 or 2 ideas to put up there. And I did. So what stopped me? What stopped me from taking action? I could say fear. I could say resistance. I could say inertia. I could say I was busy. I could say I had a lot of things on my plate. I could say I didn't have the time. I could say that I was thinking it would be a better time to do it later because I had all these other things to do. They're all excuses. Because when you want to make something happen, you can make it happen. You just figure out how to make it happen. That's what I mean about taking action. Now, you can take action without taking action. So what I did was I focused on starting up a podcasting mastermind with some friends. It was helpful. Yes, it did help me move forward. But the time I spent in the podcasting mastermind, I could have just got my podcast started. What it took was for me to actually sit down, press record, start talking, edit the recording, and upload it and post it online. When I first started podcasting, I didn't tell anybody about the podcast either. No one knew it existed. So if you're afraid of making mistakes and you want to share your voice, it doesn't necessarily have to be with a podcast. It may be through writing on a blog. It may be a book you want to write. It may be YouTube videos. When you first get started, it doesn't matter that you're not perfect because you won't have an audience. Not at the start. Not until you start telling people. So you don't have to address every single fear all at once. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of being heard, the fear of not being heard, the fear about not having the right content, the fear people won't like your content. The only fear you need to get over is the one right in front of you, the next step. So the next step then is just to get what you need to record a podcast. I'm going to use a podcast as an example. And you can talk yourself into why this is too expensive, or you don't have the money for this right now, or this is too complicated. So you start simple. I have put up podcast episodes of recordings where I had the microphone facing the wrong way. While the audio quality wasn't as good as my usual podcast episode, the content still had merit and was still valuable. Even if you put something out there and only one person listens to it, and it makes a difference for that one person, then you've done your job. You've started to change the world. So what stopped me was fear and inertia and resistance. All of that exists in the mind. I don't remember all of the fears I had. I just knew that I wasn't moving forward with the podcast. So if you find it hard to get started on your own, enlist help. And that's what I did. I decided to start a mastermind, a podcasting mastermind, with another friend who also wanted to start a podcast. And it was the mastermind that helped move me forward because I realized by our third or fourth monthly meeting, it was getting ridiculous. We were meeting about launching a podcast, yet 4 months had passed and there was no podcast episode live yet. So that's when I decided, okay, rip off the Band-Aid and just do it. And it really did not take that much time to do. And then I had resistance to sharing about the podcast. So what did I do? I had to take baby steps. That's what helped me move forward. Let one person know about it when it was super relevant in a conversation. Tell a friend or two about it. And a few more months passed and maybe I was getting like 30 people a month listening to the podcast. But I was getting comfortable with the idea of having a podcast out there. And that's when I started to shift and think, it's ridiculous, Holly. I have this huge platform, ChineseFootReflexology.com, and sure, the podcast is not always about health and wellness, but wouldn't a percentage of these people be interested in learning about the mind-body connection, how to manifest, how to tune into their inner guidance, because I know how important that is for health and vitality. So why not share the podcast with them? I believe I did that around the second or third month of the podcast. We're talking about a dozen episodes at this point. And then I let people know about the podcast. And guess what? I went from about 50 downloads a month to several thousand downloads a month. And it's been holding steady since. And at the 1-year anniversary for my podcast, it's time for the next level. I can feel it. So in you can feel this call to action. It may not be a podcast. It may be something completely different. It may be something you do in the real world, not just online. There's something that you want to do, you need to do, will make an impact for the world, but you're terrified of doing it. That's the only thing stopping you. It's not time, it's not money, it's not circumstances. It's fear, resistance, and inertia. So how do you overcome it? Well, you listen to this podcast. Actually, I have a suggestion for you. Since I know there are 53 episodes, including this one, that means there are 52 available. Each one has a unique spin and perspective on moving forward in life, on expressing your brilliance, on ease and flow, on manifesting with joy. So I want you to pick a number between 1 and 52 right now. And whatever number that is that comes to mind, the first number, go find that podcast episode and listen to it. This is the one the universe wants you to listen to right now. So not tomorrow, not next week, but right after this episode. Because that's taking action. That's how to take action with alignment. You get the little nudge from the universe, and unless you're on an airplane, sitting on the toilet, or rock climbing in Yosemite and hanging on with a single hand grip, you probably could take action on that idea that has come into your head. You could probably do something to move it forward, even if it's just writing it down in your to-do list, or doing a little bit of research online, or picking up the phone and calling someone. You could take action. So make that your mantra moving forward. When you have the idea to take action, the idea that comes to you, it's aligned with your goals, it's aligned with your heart and soul. That's the universe speaking to you, showing you the next step, and that's the only step you have to overcome. You do not have to overcome the fear of thousands of people listening to you, using the podcast example, because that's not happening yet. You only have to overcome the next step. And I even got a number when I was saying to pick a number between 1 and 52, and I don't know what that podcast episode is about. It's number 36, that's the number I got, but I am going to listen to it right after I finish recording this podcast because it's the direction that the universe has pointed me to follow. When you follow, when you get the directions, guess what? You go to where you want to go faster. It's just like driving. You need to go somewhere, you follow the navigation. If you stop when the navigation tells you to turn right on A Street, well, it's going to take you a lot longer to get to your destination, especially if you stop before every direction. But if you follow the directions as they come to you, you're going to get there in the most efficient way in the least amount of time necessary. So on that note, that's pretty much it for this week's podcast episode. I am getting a little message from the universe to say a little more celebration. So, okay. Woohoo! And I'm also going to do one more celebration. This one's for you because you're going to be taking action. Woohoo! Yay! Hooray! Go for it! Woohoo! So, go listen to that podcast episode number that you picked between 1 and 52. If you forget what number you picked, pick another one right now between 1 and 52. And you can find every single episode of the Holly C Show Express Your Brilliance with Ease and Flow on my website at www.hollyc.com. So I will say goodbye for now until we reconnect again. Bye!